I just want to clarify real quick. This is only a review of the remaster. This is not the full-on re-review of Sonic Generations I promise to do in the far future. That will happen later. Whenever. So for now, here's a slightly shorter review of Sonic X Shadow Generations. It would be a bit of an understatement to claim that Sonic remasters have been pretty horrendous. I'm not even talking about the recent stuff that Sonic Team and Sega fumbled like Sonic Origins or Colors Ultimate, but even further back with stuff like Sonic Adventure DX, or even the HD port of Adventure 2 having a few issues. Every time they've remastered something, either one thing or many things felt off. So with fans begging for remasters of games like Heroes and Unleashed, while totally understandable, now comes with this huge sense of caution because of how Sega just can't seem to handle re-releasing these beloved games that fans really want them to. So when a remaster of Sonic Generations got announced, along with revealing that Shadow was going to have a greater focus in it, I think I had every right to be pretty skeptical from the start. I do think it's really funny that they probably wanted to call this Sonic Generations Ultimate, but since Colors Ultimate was such a huge laughingstock for the fanbase, they pretty smartly dropped the Ultimate brand altogether. But it's also a bit of a shame because this remaster is more Shadow focused, and since he's the ultimate life form, the Ultimate title really would have fit here. Plus, Sonic X Shadow Generations is a bit of a weird title, but it's whatever. My sincerest condolences to the newer Sonic fans who are gonna make the mistake of searching Sonic X Shadow on Google Images and instantly regret it. I guess some things never change. When looking at the original Sonic Generations, it wasn't necessarily in need of a remaster, but I'm all for porting the game on newer systems so people can get a chance to play it. Aside from the 3DS version, Nintendo fans never really got a chance to play console generations, and PlayStation users were pretty much screwed unless they still had a working PS3 lying around, or they didn't mind streaming the game through PS Now on PS4 and PS5. Also, I just recently got into My Chemical Romance. Thank you, Emmy, go subscribe to her channel, she's about to hit 100k. And I wanted to share this fun fact that my friend AJ told me about. In the E3 trailer for Sonic Generations, which you can still come across on the Sega Europe YouTube channel, it uses the instrumental track from the song Na Na Na, which came from MCR's fourth album, Danger Days. That is so random, but I'm guessing it was probably just a placeholder or something. But getting back to Generations itself, when it came to Xbox and PC users, they were for the most part enjoying the game just fine, especially when it came to the modding communities. The Xbox 360 version was even made backwards compatible for the Xbox One and Series X/S, along with an FPS boost getting added to the game so it could run at 60 frames instead of 30. The same was done for the 360 version of Sonic Unleashed, and I'd say the framerate boost easily makes that the superior version of the game, but I sadly couldn't say the same for Generations. The framerate boost, while making the game run smoother, still caused a few issues to pop up. Most prominently, the zone names would be glitched out on loading screens, and certain parts of the levels, specifically the shortcut in Modern Chemical Plant, was completely bugged out due to the increased frame rate. Believe it or not, a lot of these issues were also present in the game's 2011 PC version. It's strange, but we also have to remember that the production of this game was pretty rushed, so this is sadly just a case of Generations being poorly optimized from the beginning. And I'm guessing someone at Sonic Team must have realized this, so Generations would be the next game to get a remaster treatment after Colors. It made sense too because Generations is a pretty beloved game in the series. Despite how horrible my Cooper's Perspective episode from 7 years ago was, Sonic Generations is easily one of my favorite games in the series, and I was kinda sad to see how badly the game was playing on Series X at points. So a remaster could easily fix these issues and grant us the superior version of Generations that both the game and fans deserve. While Colors Ultimate was handed off to a separate studio, Shadow Generations was handled by Sonic Team themselves, which could be both good and bad considering their previous efforts, but I'm guessing the decent success of Sonic Frontiers must have given them a bigger budget, because just from the trailers, this remaster actually looked a lot more promising. Some older levels that weren't in the original Generations were getting brought back, and they actually looked incredible and not cheaply made. Then the usual deluxe editions popped up, and bam, Dreamcast Sonic. Something I was begging for in previous videos. Holy shit, I was sold. There was also that Sonic Jam Legacy skin, which looked great, but you could only get it through an email subscription, which is dumb. The same shit happened with Superstars. But whatever, they already got me to pre-order the game, and not to mention the return of Terios. What? Honestly, the original Generations was still a pretty solid $40 to $50 experience for me, so paying for the original game and these cool additions, along with other downloadable content they're making for the game, I think that's a pretty damn good deal. Apart from the Casino Night pre-order, Generations never really got DLC, which was such a huge missed opportunity, so it's cool to see it get a second chance. Sega would even continue the pretty cool tradition of making animated shorts to go alongside the new releases, and the Sonic X Shadow Generation shorts are probably my favorite ones. I love seeing more of Shadow's backstory in detail, along with him having more interactions with Team Dark, and a reappearance of Emerald from Sonic Battle. That's still crazy to me. Like, holy crap, I was actually excited for a Sonic remaster. I haven't felt that way in years. I've set the game up enough. I'm gonna go right into talking about the remaster. Starting with the Sonic portion of it, it's good. In fact, it's very good. First off, I love that we have 3 save slots now. It may seem like such a minor addition, but it honestly always bugged me how Generations and even Unleashed didn't feature something as simple as this. So I'm really glad the remaster gave us save slots. When it comes to the game itself, the remaster is very much the exact same game, just with some minor tweaks. For starters, the game, at least on Series X, is running at a solid 60 frames a second, and it seems like they properly optimized the game this time around. So the shortcut in Modern Chemical Plant works now, and the level names load properly on the loading screens. Plus, I think this remaster looks gorgeous. Maybe not as good looking as Unleashed, but the remaster appears to be running the game as if it was playing on a high-end PC. As a result, the graphics look terrific, and honestly, Generations never looked bad. The fact that more people are going to get a chance to play this game while it looks and runs better is awesome. I actually replayed the original Generations on Series X before playing the remaster, and maybe it's because the FPS boost was causing a few issues to pop up, but the original game just felt a bit unpolished. I've now played through the remaster of this game 2 whole times, and during both playthroughs, I never encountered anything that seemed off or wrong. Genuinely, this version of the game feels more polished and technically sound, so I'm glad this didn't turn out to be a complete nightmare like Coer's Ultimate. Though a part of me was kinda hoping they would low-key fix Classic Sonic's gameplay to be more closer to Superstars and whatnot, but no, he plays the exact same as he did in the original Generations, which isn't bad. But Classic Sonic and Modern Sonic have the drop dash now, which I rarely use. I don't know, I'm not really the biggest fan of implementing the drop dash in a game where momentum-based gameplay wasn't really a core element, so the move just shoots you forward for a bit and that's kind of it. Classic Sonic's rolling is also pretty useless, so his drop dash is especially lackluster. Thankfully, his ultra powerful spin dash didn't get nerfed in this port. I love the spin dash. Man, I wish it was in Forces. The boost and spin dash were also remapped to the R trigger in an attempt to make the game play closer to the Frontiers, which took some adjusting to get used to, but you can remap the buttons in the options menu, which is a nice feature. They also added a really cute bonus in the levels. The Chow! The Chow initially had very little presence in the original Generations, but in the remaster, every act of the levels have 3 hidden Chow in them, and they're various different types of Chow too, which I think is really cute. I love how they're collectibles here, kinda reminds me of Advance 3. Also, I hate how they keep teasing the Chow Garden returning. Like, just bring it back already! However, my favorite part of the remaster is easily the inclusion of the Legacy skins. The Sonic Adventure skin looks incredible. A perfect one-to-one recreation of the original Dreamcast model. It's just as great as when Mario Odyssey featured the N64 Mario as a costume. I adore Dreamcast Sonic so much, I'm never removing this. And yes, I did beg Sega to put Dreamcast Sonic in a future game in previous videos before Shadow Gens was even announced. I doubt they even watch my channel, but whoever greenlit this decision, thank you! I love the skin, but hearing Roger's voice come out of Dreamcast Sonic feels wrong. But I can't just change it to Japanese, so it's not a huge problem. It's more fitting too, considering Junichi-san has been voicing Sonic since Sonic Adventure as well. I love the way the Sonic Jam skin looks. It's so blocky and cute. I do hate that it's limited to the email subscription bullshit. Like, come on, that's not fair, just put it up on the store for anyone to get. I don't think it's as appealing as Adventure Sonic, but I still love that Classic Sonic got a skin. But I do kinda hope they add the prototype rabbit skin that was in Superstars. Like, they clearly have the model ready for it and everything. It would also be pretty fitting considering Shadow's prototype skin, Terios, is also here. Plus, where's Dreamcast Shadow? Why not add him too? In terms of other stuff that got changed, lives were removed, which I don't mind, but I do find it kinda funny how in the skill shop, you can still purchase extra lives and other life-related skills. Like, what's the point? You're basically throwing away rings. In the original PS3 and 360 versions of Generations, it let you purchase a Genesis Genesis controller from the skill shop, and you can go find the original Sonic one you could play in the hub area. This wasn't in the PC version and was obviously removed in the remaster. It's not a huge deal though. I'm pretty sure everyone has a copy of Sonic 1 somewhere, and Sega does still want people to buy Origins Plus. Also, the FPS boost can kind of screw up the emulator sometimes, so it was maybe for the best to get rid of it. What's probably the biggest change is the cutscenes. Not that they were changed a lot in terms of animations, but mainly when it came to the writing and voice acting. Yeah, a lot of the cutscenes were rewritten by Ian Flynn, best known for writing Sonic Frontiers and the comics. And a lot of the changes he made here were weird, but I actually don't mind most of the rewrites. Look, I'm not proud of my original review, but I think most fans would probably agree when I say the writing in the original generations was not great to begin with. Not trying to dunk on Pontac and Graf because I'm honestly sick of mentioning these two, and they're not writing for the games anymore anyways, but that doesn't change the fact that I still thought their original writing was very paper thin and stale. So I personally don't mind the dialogue changes that Ian made. Oh yeah, that's another thing, the voice acting. I'm not gonna harp on it for too long, but I think about 90% of the cutscenes got re-recorded, which means the original voices of Tails and Knuckles in Generations, Kate Higgins and Travis Willingham, were overdubbed by Colleen and David B. Mitchell respectively. I do feel a bit mixed about that. Kate was my personal favorite Tails voice in the games, though Colleen is still really good in the part. She voices Tails in the movies for a reason. Travis and Dave's Knuckles voices weren't really my cup of tea to begin with, so I could care less in that field, but this can seem like a bit of an awkward adjustment if you're maybe used to how the original cutscenes played out. The first thing you'll probably immediately notice is how during the cutscenes where Sonic frees his friends, he didn't say anything in the original Generations, but now he actually has dialogue responding to them.
Not really worrying about that right now, Amy.
We're facing a dangerous foe, Sonic. Better be on your guard.
Sure thing.
They even changed a few other things, even at random. Like when you defeat the Death Egg robot, you immediately see Classic Eggman in the cutscene, so his reveal at the end of the game isn't really a huge surprise anymore. There was also a bit of censorship. This is a pretty controversial topic for fans, which personally didn't bother me, but it does lead to some questions. Mainly, Rouge got slightly redesigned, with her chest area being, well, shrunk, but even her back got covered up. And you probably wouldn't really notice it until you did a side-by-side comparison. And it's a bit weird. Her design always had this femme fatale influence, and it wasn't an issue in the original Generations or any of the other games for that matter, so why is it suddenly an issue now? Like, I can kinda sorta get shrinking her tits, but what is covering her back about? Like, her wings are on her back. Are they just clipping out her outfit now? That's so weird. I guess women aren't allowed to show their backs anymore. Just wait, there's gonna be a special edition of Attack of the Clones with Padme's back completely covered up. Can't show that to the kids. I also noticed they changed one part in the ending cutscene where originally Amy knocked Knuckles into a tree, but in the remaster they completely removed it. So now she just sorta knocks Knuckles back a little. I know some fans were upset that this got removed because it was kind of funny and showed how strong Amy was despite her stature, but if I'm being real, I thought the original animation looked fucking bad, so I don't really care that they removed it. The original 360 version also had a pretty horrible issue with the cutscenes being super compressed and pixelated, so the remaster's cutscenes are much better looking. Also, I like that they added the Chow in the opening and closing cutscenes. It's cute. In terms of other issues with the story, well, despite the rewrites trying to improve things, Classic Tails still just pops out of nowhere with no real explanation or introduction, and when it comes to the gameplay elements that still don't hold up, Planet Wisp still sucks, and the Time Eater is still a horrible final boss. Also, both super forms are still terrible to use in the levels. I get that some issues weren't necessarily easy for them to fix, but why not at least fix the ring counter for the super forms and make Classic Super Sonic move faster? What was the issue with that? Speaking of Classic Sonic, you remember that one glitch you can do in Classic Rooftop with the electric shield where you can jump out the 2D plane and run around in 3D? Guess what? They didn't patch it. So you can still do this glitch in the remaster. Yeah, I guess if anything, if you noticed any glitches in the remaster, they're glitches that were also present in the original game too. So I guess they mostly did a pretty solid job preserving the original version of the game. It's so crazy that they didn't patch this. Oh yeah, one minor thing that bothered me, the Metal Sonic boss fight music is missing the intro. It doesn't ruin the fight or anything, but I couldn't help but notice that and thought, oh, that's weird. Overall, I would probably still consider this to be the best version of Sonic Generations, and I'm glad Sonic Team didn't fuck it up, especially when it came to the other half of this remaster. Spoilers ahead, obviously. Shadow Generations was a very pleasant but welcome surprise for this port. Shadow has been getting a lot of attention lately, mainly thanks to the third Sonic movie releasing soon, so it was a pretty good call making new content centered around him, as an expansion showing what he was doing during the events of Generations, especially since the most presence he had in the original game was having a pretty fun boss fight, and there was also...
You've got this, Sonic.
That. The story of Shadow Generations explains what Shadow was doing and why he didn't initially show up to Sonic's birthday party in Generations. He was aboard the Space Colony Ark, investigating some suspicious activity that was going on. While traveling through the space station, he comes across Black Doom, who surprises Shadow with his return, and proceeds to send him through a really trippy version of Radical Highway. After his re-encounter with Doom, Shadow ends up finding the fake Chaos Emerald that Tails made during SA2, which he decides to take with him because, why not? It does have the same wavelength and properties, it also saved Sonic's ass last time, it could come in handy. Immediately after this, the Time Eater appears and sends Shadow to his own version of White Space, which is pretty much around the exact same time both modern and classic Sonic got sent to White Space as well. With Shadow in White Space, he notices two figures in the distance, and it's Maria and Gerald Robotnik, who appear to be ripped from their own time periods before the gun raid on the Ark. I was actually really shocked by how not only the fact that they brought Maria and Gerald back, but we actually get to see a lot of them in this new content, in both an opening cutscene before we cut to Shadow on the Ark, and there's even a little story setup you can watch before you play the campaign. It's pretty cool. Not only that, but we also get to see and interact with characters who weren't in the original Generations, like Omega, Orbot and Cubot, and even Big the Cat, who can all be found in the White Space hub area as you play the game, but only Maria and Gerald have any significance to the plot. Obviously, Shadow is pretty shocked to see these two alive again, and it's a pretty heart-wrenching concept to think that maybe Shadow could possibly save them because of this game's premise. Honestly, I think the story for Shadow Generations was handled incredibly well. I know that a lot of fans can be very vocal about Ian Flynn's writing, but seeing how little involvement Shadow himself actually had with the original Generations, I think it's cool that Ian expanded on this aspect of the game. This probably contains some of the best writing he's ever done for a Sonic game so far, and I'm glad it was for the sake of Shadow. Something else that I really respect about Shadow Generations is that it doesn't overstay its welcome either. It's about the same length as the original Generations. I think it would have been very easy to make this overshadow, no pun intended, the original game, so I'm glad they didn't take it too far. I was also shocked by the overall tone of the game, because despite its inclusion of the Black Arms plot from Shadow the Hedgehog, which personally was one of my least favorite plot points in the entire franchise, I actually didn't mind seeing them get brought back for this remaster. The whole purpose of Generations was to embrace everything about the franchise, and that's exactly what Shadow's portion does as well. It celebrates all the games that Shadow appears in, with one exception, and I think if Shadow needed an antagonist, Black Doom was a good call. It also helps that, unlike the Shadow game, Shadow Generations doesn't take itself too seriously. It can still be ridiculous, but it embraces how ridiculous it is. So this isn't just a good game for people who enjoyed Shadow's solo game, but also for people who enjoyed the other games like Adventure 2, Heroes, and I'd even say Battle. Again, Maria and Gerald are pretty essential to Shadow's character development here, and I love just about every cutscene with them too. Plus, getting new models for them is cool as hell. The voice acting's not too bad either, which if you've been following my channel for long enough, you're probably a little shocked to hear me say that. Mike Pollock as Gerald Robotnik is decent, and Stephanie Shea as Maria really stole the show for me. I thought her performance was great, but the biggest shock for me was how much I actually enjoyed Kirk Thornton as Shadow in this game. In fact, this might just be his best performance as Shadow overall. I actually felt bad for Shadow at points, and it's the first time I really cared about him since... yeah, Sonic Adventure 2, wow. I was very pleasantly surprised, and I'll give him the praise he deserves. So hey, good work, Kurt. You're still not my favorite Shadow, but you did a great job, and I'm proud of you. You truly have come a long way since...
You've got this, Sonic.
One aspect for Shadow that I personally didn't think was gonna work, but somehow did, were his new Doom abilities. I'll address them a bit more later when I talk about the gameplay, but I just thought the image of Shadow with those edgy Hot Topic wings looked ridiculous. It was gonna be a bit too laughable to be good. But no, in terms of both gameplay and story, they actually did this really well. Shadow's Doom abilities help heighten him as the ultimate life form, and even led to great character interactions with Maria and Gerald, mainly leading to a great cutscene with Maria telling Shadow that he shouldn't be full of anger all the time, and it's a really touching and perfect moment between these two.
Do you know why I named you Shadow? Because without light, there's only darkness. But a shadow will show you where to find the light. Do you understand? I don't want you to be driven by darkness. I want you to be happy. Stand in the light with peace in your heart.
Another story point that I really liked happened near the middle of Shadow's campaign. Remember the opening where he found that fake emerald that Tails made? Well, one cutscene has him showing up in Sonic's white space, and this is basically supposed to be the point in the original generations where Sonic and Shadow fought each other, which also occurred midway through Sonic's campaign too. Nice touch. There are two things I love about this cutscene. First, it shows that Shadow easily could have beaten Sonic with his new Doom abilities, but ends up holding back because he clearly doesn't want to hurt Sonic, which leads to Sonic blindsiding him and winning the fight, just like in the original game. The second thing I really like is what's revealed after the fight. Rouge shows up and is surprised that Shadow lost both the fight and the Chaos Emerald that he was holding, which Sonic ran off with. But Shadow tells Rouge that even though Sonic won the fight, he actually gave him the fake emerald, not the real one. This doesn't really affect too much of the story from Sonic's end, but I just like that Shadow doesn't end up losing his Chaos powers because he ended up tricking Sonic. It's a cool moment for him. One thing I think Shadow Generations does overall better than Frontiers did are the cutscenes, because wow. The pre-rendered ones look great as usual, but the in-game cutscenes actually look good. They don't feel cheap or half-assed in any fashion. Like, they really got a budget increase for this game. It's probably the best looking in-game cutscenes in the series since Sonic Unleashed. It's great! Though I do kinda have a theory that the reason why Shadow Generations looks so good is because the original Generations was probably the last decent looking 3D Sonic game, you know, in comparison to the other games we got in the 2010s, so they couldn't half-ass the new content because it would have felt horribly out of place, so I'm glad they didn't do a disservice to the original game. Before I discuss how the game ends, I'm going to talk about the gameplay and the new old levels that Shadow Gens brought back. I always found it interesting to hear that this remaster is running on two different game engines, with Sonic Generations running on Hedgehog Engine 1, and Shadow Generations on Hedgehog Engine 2. So if you played Sonic Frontiers, then Shadow's gameplay and controls should be pretty familiar, but I'd say they're a bit more polished. He can boost using the R trigger and use the homing attack by jumping and pressing X. I will say, going from regular Generations to Shadow can feel a bit odd because Shadow can't drift. Not that the drift is ever needed, but it is a strange absence if you were maybe used to using the drift in Sonic's portion of the remaster. Another big difference is Shadow's hub area. It's a full 3D open world, in contrast to how Sonic got a 2D one. I love how expansive the hub area can be. It's like a better focused take on the open zone concept. To make it even better, we've got Shadow's new Doom powers. As you play through the game, you'll come across these Doom gates that you can activate, which will grant Shadow a new Doom ability. The first one are the Doom Spears, which kinda reminded me of Shadow's Chaos Spears. You tap Y to send spears at enemies, or to activate certain level obstacles. Next is Doom Surf, which allows Shadow to travel on top of water, which can be very handy for traveling in the hub area. Next, and one of the more outlandish Doom powers, is the Doom Morph, which can turn Shadow into this weird squid-like creature that swims around in this purple goop, and it can even let you swing on certain orbs in the air, though this power-up heavily reminds me of Splatoon. The last Doom ability are the Doom Wings. When Shadow collects 50 rings, tapping the shoulder buttons will cause his wings to appear, and boosting in the air will let him fly for a good while. This is shockingly really helpful in some of the more difficult levels and missions, and it appears to make Shadow invincible as well. It's almost like Shadow's super form equivalent in this game. I love these edgy wings. They've really grown on me. Aside from the Doom power-ups, Shadow also has his Chaos Control ability, which you can only use once you fill up its meter at the center of the screen. Once it's filled, press the L trigger, and it'll freeze everything in the level and even slow down the timer. It could be a really helpful move, like freezing missiles in the air so you can run or platform on them, along with getting S ranks and missions easier thanks to its slowing down the timer. It did take me a bit to get used to the Chaos Control ability, but over time I did use it pretty often, and I'm sure I can master it if I keep revisiting the game. Shadow got 6 returning zones in this game. First is the Space Colony Arc, which carries elements from Final Rush and Final Chase from SA2, and some stuff from the Arc levels in the 2005 Shadow game. I love how they just simply called it the Space Colony Arc, so it's not boggled down as just being Final Chase or Final Rush. This level's a lot of fun, and it's a great opener for Shadow's story. Also, the new models for the Artificial Chaos look fucking cool. I love the way they look. The music is really good too. I think the entire soundtrack for Shadow Generations did not disappoint, and the remixes in the Space Colony Arc levels are great. The remix in Act 1 is exactly what I wanted the Arc remix in the Shadow game to sound like, so it was pretty satisfying for me to listen to. And one thing you might notice is that Act 1 of Shadow's levels are usually full 3D, while Act 2 is fully 2D, and this goes for the rest of the levels too, well except the final zone. Now, considering how kinda lacking the 2D sections have been in more recent modern Sonic games, you would probably assume the 2D levels in Shadow Generations would also be pretty disappointing. However, they're not. Yeah, the 2D levels are actually a lot of fun. The level layouts are never plain or boring, and they even do fun things like moving the camera behind or in front of Shadow to create the illusion of 3D. They really took advantage of the fact that these levels are in 2.5D. They just feel so lively and fun. It's like playing a Sonic Rush level. I never played it. Plus, I think it's a pretty cool parallel that while we don't have a classic Shadow, which I was low-key kind of afraid they were gonna put in this game, so this can make Shadow's first acts feel like the modern levels, while his second acts feel like the classic levels. Also, you don't really unlock the Doom Wings properly until the ending, but during the second act of the Space Colony arc, it actually lets you use the wings early for that level alone, and then they just disappear until you unlock them for the final zone. It's pretty strange. But at least they set up the wings early so they're not super confusing to use later. Shadow's next zone is easily my favorite. It's Rail Canyon from Sonic Heroes. This was the one level that I was most hyped to play, and they did not disappoint. I adore the way this game reimagined the level. The multiple pathways are excellent, and I love how they use the grind rail switches in both acts. It led to some really fun platforming scenarios. I'm so happy with the way Rail Canyon turned out. I especially love how the trains in Act 2 appear to be chasing you throughout the level, kinda similar to Classic City Escape with the gun truck. They even kept one of my favorite parts of the original level, where during the last area you can hop on the roof and run straight to the goal ring. They even added a spring up there like they knew the players were gonna try to do this again. I love that. The remixes are also great, with Act 1 remixing Rail Canyon's music, while Act 2 remixes Bullet Station. Kinda reminds me of how modern Seaside Hill did a similar thing. Rail Canyon Act 1 might be my favorite remix in the entire game. The keyboards really surprised me. It sounds so good. Every 2 zones, the game has you play some missions in order to unlock the boss keys, just like the original generations. Each act only has 2 missions. You have to beat both missions in each act to unlock the keys. This would be an issue if the missions were maybe a drag, but they're really not. Most of them can be beaten in one go, but they're pretty decent challenges. Yeah, they're not bad, just not really too much else for me to say about them. Every 2 zones you fight a boss, and the first one you encounter after Rail Canyon is the Bio-Lizard. Fascinating choice considering this was the pre-final boss in Adventure 2, and the Bio-Lizard was a boss fight in the 3DS version of Generations, but Sonic was fighting it there. So this version of the boss goes back to fighting Shadow, and it's a fantastic reimagining of the fight. It starts out like normal, just run for a bit until the Bio-Lizard tires out, and then you grind up to its back and smack it. But as the fight goes on, the Bio-Lizard sends out those purple orbs from the original fight, and uses them to create extra limbs of sorts, which you can now attack Shadow with. You just have to wait until one of these limbs gets stuck in the ground, and then home in on them to break them apart, which will make them turn into little tiny orbs again that you can use to reach the top of the Bio-Lizard. It's a pretty fantastic fight. The Supporting Me remix is solid as well. Getting back to the levels, the next zone is Kingdom Valley? Holy shit, what a level to bring back, and it's just as good as the last 2. I feel like of the 06 levels they could have brought back, Kingdom Valley is probably one of the more popular ones, alongside Crisis City, which obviously appeared in the original generations, but Kingdom Valley is a bit more significant considering it was in the original demo for the game as well. The original level in 06 was kinda not good and painfully unfinished, so it's cool to see it return in Shadow Generations, and it seems like they really utilized a lot of the level's gimmicks to their fullest potential, like those bits where you grind on the wind, and you could even Doom Surf on the water, which is a lot of fun, and I think a lot of us would greatly prefer using the Doom Surf over that god-awful hover vehicle from the original game. That was so fucking bad, holy shit. Really, this reimagining of the level is basically what Kingdom Valley could have been like if it was actually polished and fully realized. So, if they actually finished the level, basically. It's great, and it's probably my second favorite level in Shadow Generations, right behind Rail Canyon. Also, getting to see Eggman's robots from Sonic 06 return, along with being able to beat them in one hit without their health bars, feels kinda surreal to see. Like, it almost feels illegal to play at points. So after Kingdom Valley, we get Sunset Heights from Forces? Okay. So remember how I mentioned how how Act 1 of the levels are full 3D, while the 2D levels are saved for the second acts? Well, that translates here too. Yes, we have a fully 3D Sunset Heights, and it's actually fun to play. Yeah, it's not just a straight line anymore with boring 2D sections. It's a fun 3D platforming level that I actually look forward to replaying in the future. I could never say that about the original Sunset Heights, so this is pretty cool. Hell, even the second act has some pretty fun 2D platforming. What a vastly huge improvement for this zone. Plus, they still maintain the feel of Forces, because they still include those cutscene-like QuickTime events, so it's pretty neat that they were able to maintain the original personality of the Forces level while also making it better. That's really impressive. Good job, Sonic Team! After 7 years, you finally redeemed yourselves. Yes, holy crap, Forces was 7 years ago, what the hell. After those two zones and their missions, you end up fighting the next boss, and it's Metal Overlord. Yep, right from Sonic Heroes. And this boss is actually far different to how it was in the original game. This one has you using Doom Surf throughout the fight, and what's pretty neat is that there's a mission you play in Kingdom Valley, where you're traveling on water using Doom Surf, and it teaches you how to use this spin attack to smash these crates. It kinda reminds me of F-Zero. So in Metal Overlord's fight, you can spin into objects in the water to hurt him, which is a pretty smart design choice. The boss itself is decent, though it might be my least favorite one. Not that it's bad, but I kind of felt like it dragged on a bit. There aren't any lives in this game, and they also put checkpoints in certain parts of the fights, so the game thankfully doesn't punish you by making you play through the whole fight if you end up dying. Still, it's not one of my favorite fights. The change of setting here really fascinates me. The original fights in Heroes were still in stormy weather, but they mainly had you fighting up in the clouds, so having it take place in the ocean is pretty interesting. The remix of What I'm Made Of is cool too, and I think they even had Johnny re-record his vocals for the remix as well. Very similar to what Circuit Freak did with their remix of Open Your Heart. The one aspect I didn't really enjoy that much about the fight is Metal Sonic's new voice. Look, I don't like being the voice actor guy, but I just kinda hate this new voice for Metal Overlord. It's a bit too over the top and ridiculous for me. Nowhere near matching the appeal of Ryan Drummond's Metal Overlord voice. No offense to the new actor, these were pretty huge shoes to fill. Ryan did voice Sonic after all. And it's not a bad voice, the performance was just not my cup of tea.
Accept your fate, fake as hell. Let's see how long you last on such unstable terrain. Everyone will be challenged by an imposter like you.
After Metal Overlord, we get to play through one other level, which is Chaos Island from Sonic Frontiers? This level was probably the most confusing choice, especially since Shadow was never in Frontiers. I also wasn't too crazy about the original Chaos Island either, but I will say, this new version of it that Shadow runs through is still pretty good. I kinda like the idea that they took a level that was originally open zone and turned it into a Generations type level. Act 1 is a lot of fun, and unlike the original Chaos Island, it's in full 3D. That said, Act 2's 2D sections are still a decent amount of fun, way better than the original level's forced and useless 2D sections that really cut you off guard. Also, for some people who might think the inclusion of this level may be a bit too soon, just a reminder, when Sonic Generations came out in 2011, it included Rooftop Run from Sonic Unleashed, which was only 3 years old at that point, and Planet Wisp from Sonic Colors, which was a game that was only 1 year old at that point. So I personally don't think it's too out of the ordinary that we got a level like this in Shadow Generations. I'd say it's a little more confusing because Shadow never really went to this level before, but it's still fun. Also, remember how the lava was instant kill in Frontiers? Well, not in Shadow Generations. I guess Shadow's built different. The next boss fight is another part of Shadow Generations that really shocked me. It's Mephiles from Sonic 06! They brought back Mephiles? He was the one character I never would have thought we'd ever see again. But here he is, with a brand new boss fight. Or more so a reimagining of his fight from 06. And guess what? It's another good boss fight. Pretty similar to Kingdom Valley, it doesn't feel like it's just a reimagining of the fight, but more certain aspects and concepts were finally being fully realized and properly executed. You can't hurt Mephiles like normal. Instead, you have to wait for an opportunity to use the Doom Morph, and boost into him to land a few hits. As the fight continues, you even get to see Mephiles using some of his old moves from the original fight, like cloning himself and turning into these huge monsters that you can boost into using your Doom Morph. This fight's a lot of fun, but I really just can't comprehend that someone somewhere at Sonic Team pitched this idea to bring back Mephiles of all characters, and they absolutely crushed it with this new fight. I'd say this is probably tied with the BioLizard as my favorite boss fights in the game. But the one thing I'm not super huge on, which some of you might have already guessed, is Mephiles' new voice. No offense to the the new actors again, but man, you really couldn't top Dan Green. His Mephiles voice was super cheesy, but really evil sounding. With that said, I do think Mephiles came out with a better sounding new voice in comparison to, say, Metal Overlord, so there's that.
I will defeat you and restore myself to the timeline. To exist! There is no future for you. Ever.
After the boss fight with Mephiles, you're basically in the end game. Though one huge tip I'll say is that in most of the levels, you can come across Doomseye, and you need to make sure you land a hit on him. That way you'll collect an item that can activate one of the Doom Eyes in the hub area. If you don't do this, then the game's gonna force you to replay a few levels to chase down and smack Doom again. But I do appreciate the way the game helps guide the player on where to go in the hub area using the on-screen display. But once you activate all the Doom Eyes and beat all the zones and boss fights, you'll gain access to the final level in the game, which is Radical Highway from Sonic Adventure 2. An interesting choice for Shadow's last level in Generations, considering it was his first level in SA2, and it's the only level of his where both acts are in 3D. Yeah, there's little to no 2D sections in Radical Highway at all. Radical Highway was also in the 3DS version of Generations where both Sonics played through it. I'm guessing they went with that level for that version since it was probably the second most popular level behind City Escape in the polls, but it did feel a bit strange that Sonic ran through that level considering it was supposed to be Shadow's. Obviously, I think the new version in Shadow Generations is better, though it's not just the regular level spread in 2 acts. The first act starts out like normal at first, but then you find out that this level probably has the most Doom Eye intrusions, so both of the acts can have some pretty trippy level design to play through, along with needing to use the Doom Wings to fly over several sections. I'm guessing they added way more of these areas here because this is the final level of Shadow's story, and they wanted to go out in a more grander scale, meaning these are also the longest levels for Shadow. But while Planet Wisp taking forever kinda ruined the original Generations, this version of Radical Highway thankfully isn't too bad. It's also far better balanced. Both acts being in full 3D and actually fun to play through also helps. If there are aspects in this new version of Radical Highway that kinda bug me, I don't like that the blimps look a bit bland now. I don't know, I kinda like the way the original fonts and logos looked in SA2, so it sort of feels like they got a bit of a downgrade here. But honestly though, the biggest offender of this reimagining of Radical Highway is easily the removal of the Knights Towers. Like, what happened to them? They're not anywhere in the background. Those were such cute little Easter eggs. Anyways, Radical Highway is a cool level and all, and a solid one to go out on, but since it is the last level in Shadow's campaign, I did want to point out how kinda weird it is that not a single level from Shadow's own game got brought back for this remaster. I mean, sure, there is the Space Colony arc, but that was mostly based off the levels in SA2. Little to no elements from Shadow's arc level was brought back. Then again, that level was boring as shit, so it was probably better to lift more from SA2. I do wonder if there were at least plans to bring back Westopolis or something. There are even some sections where you're skydiving down these skyscrapers, and it makes me wonder if these are maybe homages to Westopolis in a way. If not Westopolis, I think Digital Circuit would have been a pretty cool solo Shadow level to bring back. That one at least had a good amount of colors and some pretty fun gimmicks they could have played around with. Hell, if they were okay with putting Shadow in games he was never originally in, I kinda wish they brought back Cole Edge from Sonic Unleashed. The original Generations was really lacking a snow area, so I think it would have been cool if they brought that back, even if it was just for Shadow. Oh well. Anyways, after Radical Highway is the final boss, Black Doom. More specifically, Devil Doom from the Shadow game. But unlike that game, this Devil Doom fight has 2 phases, and it's also fun. The first phase uses similar elements from the Metal Overlord boss fight from earlier, like surfing on the water and spinning into objects to send them at Devil Doom. Once you do that a few times, you can home in on him and smack him a bunch. Later on in phase 1, you'll even have to do a platforming section with the Doom Morph, which is pretty fun. They even throw new players some leeway by placing a good amount of springs at the bottom of the area. That way you won't end up dying if you miss a jump. The second phase, known as Neo Devil Doom, has you fighting in the air using the Doom Wings. This phase is more of the same. You just chase down Doom while spinning into objects mid-air, and keep homing in on him to damage him enough. I'd probably say the second phase is a little easier, but it's still fun. I went back to replay every main level and boss fight in the previous games that got brought back for this remaster, mainly so I can compare things and maybe notice a few Easter eggs or whatever. But I gotta say, Devil Doom in Shadow's game is seriously one of the most boring and lackluster boss fights in the franchise. The revamped version of the boss fight in Shadow Generations isn't anywhere near comparable. It plays nothing like it, and as a result, it's better and actually fun. Apologies to any OG Devil Doom fans out there watching. I don't care that you exist. The music during the fights is also pretty good. Phase 1 has a solid orchestral track, and Phase 2 features a neat remix of All Hail Shadow. I think they're both good songs, but I kinda wish Phase 1 featured a remix of I Am All of Me. I think that would have been more fitting, but it's not the end of the world. I've been dropping a bunch of spoilers throughout this review, but if you guys don't want to see how Shadow's story ends, then skip to this point of the video. I'll give you till I say 5. 5, you're too slow, here's the ending. Upon defeating Black Doom, the white space starts dissipating and Shadow ends up losing his Doom powers as a result. Root shows up and tells Shadow that Sonic is about to face off against the Time Eater, so Shadow gives her the real Chaos Emerald, that way she can switch it with the fake one that Sonic ran off with. Before Shadow heads out with Rouge, he goes see Maria and Gerald again, but discovers that they're both fading away because their timelines are being restored. Shadow, being fully aware of where they're about to go, initially wants to reverse the effects and almost tries to go stop Rouge to get the Chaos Emerald back, but Maria tells Shadow that they don't want to be frozen in time, and tells him that he needs to move on from the past without them. She even stops Shadow from trying to warn them about their ultimate fate, and says that she'll see him again at one point and that she will always be in his heart. Oh my god, is that a Sonic Battle callback? That's so awesome. Thus, Shadow leaves behind Maria and Gerald, catching up with Rouge to get back to the white space that Sonic and company are in. Though, as he's leaving, he ends up shedding a tear, which Rouge ends up catching. Aw, dude, that's sad as hell. And that was Shadow's campaign, and what a sad way to end the story. A part of me was wondering if they were maybe gonna try to retcon the events of the gun raid, and maybe Shadow was actually gonna save Gerald and Maria this time around. But no, they kept it the same. But I guess they couldn't really mess with the continuity here since this game does still take place during the events of Generations. With that in mind, I don't know who was the first one to point this out, but the juxtaposition between both Shadow and Sonic's campaigns are kind of hilarious. Like, both classic and modern Sonic are just sort of vibing and revisiting good memories. Meanwhile, Shadow was basically reliving trauma. Poor guy. I'm glad Ian Flynn at least did Shadow justice in this game, and I greatly enjoyed the story here more than Frontiers. I don't have too much else to really say about it. It was just a really good time. In terms of extra content, Shadow's white space is very expansive and has a lot of collectibles to look for, like the item chests and music boxes you can open, which can unlock music tracks and concept art. Just like with the original Generations, once you complete the missions, you can jump at the bell above their entrance to cause a music note to appear, which you gotta chase after in order to unlock an extra. Though the main difference here is that you're having to chase them down in a 3D open world compared to Sonic's 2D white space. As a result, some of the music notes can be kinda difficult to chase after, especially the gold ones. But also like the OG Generations, the music notes have set paths, so you should be able to collect them once you get their pattern down. You can go view all the stuff you unlocked in Shadow's collection room, which lets you rewatch the cutscenes, view concept art, and listen to music. I think the coolest thing about the concept art in this game is that it's all new material that wasn't in the original Generations, along with the fact that some of these sketches and whatnot haven't really gotten released before, so for the sake of video game preservation, this is really awesome. They seriously went all out with all this. Shadow's iconic motorcycle is also in the collection room, which you can hop on to view some story summaries for Shadow in the previous games. The motorcycle is so goofy, but I'm glad they included it somewhere. Back to the white space, you can come across Orbot and Cubot, who ask you to find some rocket parts so they can escape the white space. In exchange, you get more unlockable extras, which is neat. I think the last main piece of extra content I'll bring up, which you can get through the Digital Deluxe Edition, is the Terrio skin. When this got announced, I was actually pretty damn excited. The model looks great, and I love the way his spines look. Very Archie Sonic. Plus, seeing Terrios fight Black Doom and Mephiles is pretty goddamn hilarious. This is exactly why I want more games to keep including more retro/prototype skins like this. It's fun. Hopefully at some point they can add in Shadow's SA2 model as well. And I think that's just about all I have to say for Shadow Generations. Man, and I was hoping this was going to be a shorter video. This remaster just gave me a good amount of stuff to talk about. Generations is also one of my favorite Sonic games, so seeing it get a good remaster is actually really nice. It's easily the best remaster of a Sonic game I've ever played, but then again, there's not a lot of solid competition in that field. The original Generations plays just fine, and the new Shadow content is great. Plus, if anyone complained about the original Generations being too short, now you have new Shadow content to play through too. Not to mention, it isn't like we're not gonna get more content for this game, since in December we are getting that tie-in DLC for Sonic Movie 3. It's gonna feature a brand new level of movie Shadow in Japan, which so far looks pretty sick. The fact that they got Keanu himself to voice Shadow for this new content is so freaking cool. Sega of the 2010s would have never allowed this. I like to imagine he was maybe in the recording booth recording his lines as Shadow, and maybe he was like, oh man, I'd love to voice Shadow in the actual games at some some point, and then maybe the voice director just went, "Oh really? This man is so generous and so non-Hollywood that he probably did it for free." I'll definitely take a look at the Keanu DLC in a future video, but for now, go check out Sonic X Shadow Generations. I know I'm a couple weeks late, and a lot of you are probably already well aware of how good this remaster is, but still, go get the game if you somehow haven't. Sonic Team finally delivered a good remaster of a Sonic game, and it only took several failures. Hopefully this is a positive sign for future games, and some other potential remasters. So best of luck to Sonic Team and whatever other endeavor they decide to go for next. I really enjoyed this remaster, and I can't wait for the Keanu Reeves DLC. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next review. Take care, and have a good night.